Okay, good evening everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to the Community Committee meeting of the 6th of March. And before we start, I think I should go through and just familiarise with a few things. If there's any members or officers in physical attendance with an electronic device, could you please mute them to avoid any feedback? Any remote participants, please keep your camera and microphones off unless you wish to speak, and ideally not use the camera facility at all, as this can affect the quality of the IT connection. This meeting is being recorded, and the data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data protection retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's website. Any members accessing the meeting remotely should use their Swale Borough Council or KCC laptop to participate virtually. If you join using the link on the website or on a mobile or tablet device, it is not always possible to identify you, and you may not be recorded as in remote attendance. I'd like to welcome everyone here, members, visiting members and members of the public, and of course our local media. I'd like to advise that the following staff are in attendance: Director of Regeneration and Neighbourhoods, Emma Wiggins; the Head of Environment and Leisure, Martin Cassell; Policy and Engagement Officer at the far end is Janet Dart; Community Partnership Managers, Sarah Jane Radley; Leisure and Technical Services Manager, Jay Jenkins; and Democratic Services, we have Billy Attaway, and we also have Stephanie Curtis from the Community Safety Partnership. There is no fire drill planned for tonight. However, should the fire alarm sound, then those in attendance here should leave via the exits indicated and the assembly points where directed, which is basically there's fire exit there, particularly for the members of the public, out through there, and use the stairs. Please do not use the lifts. Is there anyone in attendance who may require assistance in leaving the building in the event of a fire, particularly those who may have mobility issues? If you could make yourself known so that we can put measures in place to make sure you can exit the building safely. I'd like to ask Billy Attaway if there are any apologies for absence and confirmation of any substitutes.
Thank you, Chair. There's apologies for absence for Councillor Leanne Moore, who's substituted by Councillor Mike Whiting, Councillor Claire Martin, who's substituted by Councillor Ben Martin, Councillor Pete Neal, who's substituted by Councillor Peter Marchington, and Councillor Karen Watson, who's substituted by Councillor Dolly Wooster.
Okay, thank you. I take it you've all seen a copy of the minutes, so I'd like to ask you if the committee can approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of January 2024, minutes numbers 543 to 549, as a correct record of that meeting. Oh, okay, thank you. Did someone shout? No? No? Okay. I need to ask now if there's any declarations of interest. Does anyone have any pecuniary interest that they need to declare? Or any non-pecuniary interests? Sorry. Councillor MacDonald?
Yeah, it's okay. I inherited some shares from my grandfather in the Sheerness Bowls Club.
Okay.
So I know it's only mentioned in there.
Councillor Worcester?
Thanks, Chair. It's non-pecuniary, but I do sit as a trustee for part of the Oasis school that's over on the island. I noticed some of that is mentioned within some of the reports this evening, so I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Sorry.
Same as Councillor Worcester, I am a director and trustee of Isle of Sheppey Community Hub at Oasis, non-pecuniary.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? That brings us down to agenda item 5, which is the draft parking policy. Before we go into that, I have 2 members of the public who wish to present a petition, and they can, of course, when they've presented that petition, speak for 3 minutes, which is normally done at the table down the front there. So, the first person I'd like to call out is Marilyn Ward. If you don't mind taking that chair there. Now, yeah, if you look at the box in front of you, there's 2 buttons. One will have like a speaker with voice coming out.
No, the big one in the middle, that's it. Yeah.
That's it. Your 3 minutes will start as you start to speak, and with about 30 seconds to go, you'll get a little prompt that you're running out of time, sort of thing.
Quite
But
small.
thank you.
Right, my name is Marilyn Ward. I work for the Little Oyster Tea Room. I've collected well over 500 signatures in my petition. I spoke to near on all of those who have said that if this goes through, pay and display, in the Little Oyster car park, they will not be using the car park. They will literally be parking in the surrounding streets. If this goes through, this will affect so many people. Pensioners, dog walkers, beach cleaning volunteers. You will have to pay a company to do that if you charge for the car park. Walking groups, running groups, fishermen, families with young children, memorial bench owners, beach hut owners or renters, disabled groups who come to our cafe for a drink and a walk along the Leas, visitors to our island. As I said, they will not pay for parking. They will park on residential roads around the Leas, on the verges or blocking driveways to residents. And how are you going to police this when they'll be kicking off every people who they don't stay for an hour, they'll stay all day at the Leas. Think carefully before you vote tonight. Lots are watching online. They are all voters. Lastly, I've had lots of messages, but one I feel sums up why you shouldn't charge for the Little Oyster car park. My name is Leslie Wade. I have a memorial bench for my son, who I tragically lost. I like to go and visit him 4 to 6 days a week. I have to drive to the Leas to do this. The cost will impact me as I'm a pensioner, counting every penny. This will not only impact my purse, it will impact my mental health if I'm unable to visit my son on his bench. If I have to check my bank account just to visit my son. I hope the decision hasn't already been made, as the Times and Guardian has reported, because islanders have long memories and it's plastered all over the internet, and our people are not very happy. That's it.
Thank you very much for that. If I could now call upon Simon Fowle. Thank you.
Sorry? That doesn't count as me starting either. Okay. I wish to object to the proposals to introduce car parking. Queenborough Ward is one of the most deprived wards in the country, as you in the government state. Castle Connection is based next to the library, provides charitable and health services to some of the most vulnerable members of society. Volunteers who park in the car park will incur a charge of over £7 for 4 hours, which will no longer be able to carry on their duties. Staff members on a 4-hour shift, a parking charge will equate to 25% of their salary. Some clubs have already said that if the charge is imposed, that it will be no longer viable for them to continue. There are only a handful of businesses in Queenborough, and by Queenborough Park there is only Bosun's and a Flying Dutchman, and we rely on visitors to functions. These charges will deter them. In 4 days in Bosun's tea room, we've had 180 signatures, and considering we only seat 12 people. As businesses, we've had to deal with COVID, energy prices, cost of living crisis, recession, and now this. The houses around the car parks are small terrace houses, and their frontage is in some instances less than an average car park space, together with parking restrictions on one side of the street due to their narrow width. This means there's a shortage of available car parks, and these parks provide a valuable overflow to deal with this. Swells Council have always said they are behind businesses in the community and their plans for the Queenborough regeneration. Let's not fail before we've even started. The beach and its surrounding area are a natural resource that we are blessed to have, and as such should be freely available to those who wish to use it. On most days we have many visitors who come just to take in the natural beauty of the area and the magnificent sunsets that we're lucky to have here in Queenborough and Minster. It benefits both their well-being and mental health. From the Swells Council website, free car parks in Swells, there's 688 spaces, only 89 of these been selected, and they're all located on the island. The data on the show shows that a 4-hour rate in Faversham there's 259 spaces, Ireland 306, and at the £6.60 rate there's only 142 in Faversham, yet there's 593 spaces on the island. Faversham pay an average of £5.20, we're paying at an average £6.60. 66% of the high-pay car parks are on the island. I find these figures somewhat at odds with the facilities available at each car park. For instance, the Forum Shopping Centre is much cheaper than Sheerness, yet there is access to fast trains and abundantly more shops. Faversham has a myriad of shops and markets and fast trains, yet again much cheaper than Sheerness or even the proposed charges in Queenborough. The logic behind this, I cannot see a rational explanation for it, other than, I don't know. I hope that these considerations can be given to the above points and the true impact of these proposals on my community can be considered. Thank you, committee.
Right, thank you. I'd like to just mention something that Marilyn said, that there was an article in the KM which said the charges have been already introduced in the budget. I read that as the same, but I did speak to the KM and they politely pointed out to me, if I'd read all the information, it was in there that it's going to be decided tonight and the decision will be made tonight. But however that goes, I don't know, but I just thought I'd clear that up for you. Thank you. Before we go on to agenda item 5, the draft parking policy, there have been a tabled update tonight, and I appreciate some of you may have had a busy day. Has everyone had the opportunity to read this? Or would people appreciate a short recess to give you a chance to go through it? Does anyone need a recess? Has everyone read this tabled update? Then in that case, we can continue. If I could ask the officer to introduce the report, and then we can start the debate on it after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Good evening, members of the gallery. This is this report in front of you tonight, and the draft parking policy is a culmination of work that started back in June last year. The Parking Policy Working Group was created and is made up of members that sit on this committee, and what that group have done is gone through lots of data and information relating to how we operate our parking service. So the policy and the report you see in front of you is not just about fees and charges. It's about wider policy decisions that will help us make future decisions around parking. So, of course, there is a focus on fees and charges and whether to charge or not, but the policy in front of you is about laying out how we operate our overall service, not just about fees and charges. The chair of this committee and the chair of the working group, Councillor Palmer, attended the 4 area committees for each of the areas at the start of the process and asked for both member and member of the public information around what they felt worked and didn't work in regards to the parking service. And after consideration of that, a draft policy went out for consultation in November for 8 weeks. Alongside that consultation that the council carries out, we're required by law under the Road Traffic Act to do a statutory consultation when we make changes to fees and charges or elements of the restrictions within car parks. And that's called what's called an off-street parking places order. This meant that posters were displayed in each of the car parks across the borough and a notice placed in the local newspaper. Now, the whole point of that process is it makes people aware and it gives them the opportunity to give objections to what's being proposed. For members, you've had a report tonight because the consultation only ended very recently on that. You've had the tabled report tonight, which gives you a summary of those objections. And to be fair, alongside the petitions, there are a large number of comments and objections to the proposals. The report and the appendices in front of you detail some of the feedback that we received in the policy consultation and the action that the working group have decided to recommend to the committee tonight. What it also explains is that whereas previously all fees and charges decisions have been made under the budget process at full council, now that we've moved into the committee system, that's been amended so that whilst the amount per hour is decided by full council, the hours that we charge and the locations that we charge are policy decisions and therefore the remit of this committee. So that's the explanation for why we're here tonight. Now, there are 5 recommendations within the report. Items 1 to 3 relate to consideration of the consultation that we had on the draft policy and then whether to adopt the policy as drafted. Understandably, a lot of the feedback during both consultation processes is centred around fees and charges. The working group have responded on the basis, so in the original consultation that went out with both the budget and the parking policy, there was the proposal of a fixed evening fee, so after 7 o'clock it being a standard fixed rate. In response to feedback from the consultations, the working group recommended to remove that because that wouldn't have benefited those that were looking to stay short term in the car parks, i.e. an hour or 2 hours. And what they've recommended to you and is recommendation 4 is a reduction in the amount of hours that we charge our hourly rate for. So taking it down from midnight until 10 p.m. and changing it from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. So a 3-hour reduction in the charging period in front of you. That's recommendation 4. As you've already heard tonight, the working group also reviewed all of our free car parks and their usage, and the recommendation by the working group was to consider charging at 3 of those from April. That's recommendation 5. I'm happy to open to the floor, Chair.
Thank you for that, Martin. We do, however, have an amendment, so I think we need to take the amendment first. And the amendment really, as I see it, relates to the item, the recommendation number 5, to members agree the implementation charging as described in 2.14 at 3 car parks currently free of use. So if I could ask Councillor Nundy to read out your recommendation, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. My
Chair,
amendment.
a point of order on this one. I think you have to take the lead item first and have it proposed and seconded before you can amend it.
Okay. Thank you for that. No. And we'd hate to be back here in a few months just to redo it after whatever. So, thank you for pointing that out. We have 5 recommendations on the table. I'd like to move them recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Worcester. So now we can move over to Councillor Nundy, who can introduce his amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I read the amendment, I'd actually just like to thank Simon and Marilyn for coming up. I know it can be quite daunting speaking in front of groups of people. I think you both spoke absolutely brilliantly, and I think you've raised some very valid points. My amendment is to remove the charges proposed at the Little Oyster car park, Park Road and the Library car park in Queenborough. This income would be replaced with 24 grand saved by not purchasing 3 parking machines, charging at Swale House during the weekdays and evening, as currently we only as we only charge at weekends currently. Charge for motorhomes on the Shingle Bank and Shellness Road. Ideally, there would be chargeable spaces at Barton's Point, as it has made. As it has the most facilities, toilets, etc. Charge from coach parking at the new coach parking facility agreed to be installed opposite the Shingle Bank by the Community Committee on the 1st of March 2023. Use the money. Now, the actual amendment I've written says that would be saved, but I would like to change that now to could be saved from connecting Barton's Point to the mains drainage and now not having to pay to empty the cesspit to fund this shortfall, and use any income from Barton's Point this year to fund the shortfall. To start off with, I'd like to address the main point. People have turned up to this meeting tonight and they have spoken clearly. Residents from the Isle of Sheppey do not want parking charges in those 3 car parks. The Little Oyster is a very small car park that sits on the beautiful Minster Leas, and it has a lovely cafe just next to the car park that provide refreshments. That beach is used by various community groups, including the people that very recently lifted kilograms upon kilograms of rubbish that had drifted onto the beach. If we start charging to park in that car park, they aren't going to do that because they're going to be out of pocket. The Park Run also operates on the Leas, which is a really good... The great thing about Park Run is it's free. At the point of access, nobody has to pay to go to it. All you have to do is print off a little barcode and you can go and do it, and you get a time, and there's a real community feel in there. And if people have to start paying to go to it because they have to pay to park in a car park, that is no longer a free community event because you're having to pay to park there. No, it would be, relatively short amount that you'd have to pay, but it's besides the point. It should be free. And, Marilyn hit the nail on the head. People have got benches up on that beach to remember their loved ones, and they might just want to go and sit down there for half an hour just to think about their family member, just reminisce for a bit. And I don't think they should have to pay to do that on the island. So I think that is an absolutely beautiful beach, and it should be enjoyed by the community for free. Moving on to Queenborough, the 2 car parks there, Simon raised some really good points about the castle connections and the services that are offered there. The volunteers won't be able to afford to do it because they're not getting paid, nor can the charities that they're working for afford to reimburse them the parking charges because charities are tight at the moment. Funding has decreased to them. Donations have gone down because there's a cost of living crisis. There are, the Flying Dutchman, the Admiral's Arm, the Bosun's Tea Room. They're all really nice, independently run. They are community spaces. People can go there, they can enjoy a nice meal, a really succulent meal, and then they can go for a nice walk along Queenborough Harbour, and it's lovely. And I don't see why we're charging people to park in those car parks. I think the main point that I'd like councillors to consider in regards to my recommendation is, I haven't been on the council very long, but I have been to quite a few community meetings, full council meetings, health and housing committee meetings, and I've never seen this many people turn up. So thank you very much for turning up tonight. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nundy. Do I have a seconder? All right. And in that case, do you want to speak now, or do you want to reserve your right to speak?
I'll speak now. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our public speakers tonight. It's nice to have members of the public and press attend our community meeting. I think this is the first time we've had public in attendance. It is unfortunate that some have misrepresented when the decision was going to be made online. I'd like to turn to the officer remarks, the opening remarks. It was said that posters were placed in car parks and notices in newspapers. No mention of use of our website or social media. No mention of consulting the parish or town councils concerned. In 2.1 of the Swales Statement of Intent for supporting town and parish councils, it states we will ensure town and parish councils are informed of any consultations relevant to them and their residents, and that they are invited to have their say and that their views be given due weight and consideration. If Swale hasn't asked the parish and town council, how can they have responded and their remarks be given due weight and consideration? Is this a flawed consultation? I think it is. I don't see the recommendation to charge on free car parks in the minute of the working group meetings, which I have in front of me on a laptop. I'd like to point out that neither myself or Councillor Neil were present at the meeting that it was decided, if it was decided. I must say nothing said so far in this, tonight has changed my view on this issue. We should not be charging for these car parks, especially not at the ridiculously high town centre rates that were proposed. The amendment outlined by my colleague that we have tabled lists a number of projects that would either bring in income to the council or over time save the council money. I'm really not sure why the council did this, why we punished ourselves and the council's reputation with these proposed parking charges. When last year nighttime charges were introduced, admittedly financial decisions were tougher, or predicted to be tougher last year than they were this year. We are not having to use as much from reserves as was proposed last year. The budget the other week could have sailed through without the hurt to the public that the public now feel, and it reignites the uncaring council image and the money-grabbing council image. After 5 years of repairing this council's reputation on the island, this has trashed it.
Okay, I open it up to members, and I've got to... Sorry, Councillor... Okay.
Thank you. Actually, a lot of what I was going to say has been said, but it's worth saying again because it is important. A lot of people here tonight, and even more, came to the Sheppey Area Committee. That in itself should say a lot. Okay, people are coming out to protest against these charges in large numbers. Okay, if you want to know what the impact is, listen to what they said at that meeting. Listen to what the people here are saying. Okay, what people on all sides here are saying. Okay, there are some stories that were said at that committee meeting. An elderly resident described how much longer it takes her to go for a walk than other people, and she has to pay for that. People using the sailing club, they are there for hours. Okay, it doesn't take half an hour to go for a sail. Okay, we want people involved in physical activity, not prevented from doing it. We want people going to support groups, Castle Connections, nonprofit charity, a lot going on there. We're asking bereaved people to have to pay to go to support groups. I mean, it's just, it's wrong. So, yes, there is a lot going on here, and I'm sure other people have a lot more to say. And just look at the recording from the Swale Area Committee. Listen to what those people said. Yeah. Everything has been said. Yeah. Thank you.
Well said.
I have a few speakers. I've got Councillor Perkin, followed by Councillor Whiting, Councillor Shield, followed by Councillor Worcester, and then followed by Councillor Marchington.
Thanks, Chair. My first question, I don't know if Councillor Nundy and Councillor Jays can answer this question, is how much is this amendment due to cost the council? and how much money is the amount of money that you've proposed to replace that with going to come to? It seems pretty speculative, so I'd like to know what the answer to that, and then can I come back after we've had that question answered, please?
Go on.
Thank you, Chair. As I've been named, it's nice to be able to come back. So initially, when I asked the Section 151 officer for the figures, there wasn't any. And then about a week later, suddenly 38k was the speculative figure. As Councillor Nundy's outlined, free parking machines, that's 24 grand. So therefore, we're down to 14 grand. We don't know how much coach parking would be. It wasn't in fees and charges. We don't know how much to charge on the Shingle Bank. It wasn't in fees and charges. If Barton Point was connected to the mains drains, that'd be between, I think it's about 10 grand a year to empty now. So I think we're not here to make a decision on the costing. The costing's for P&R, but obviously I understand you want to make sure we're sending something good. That's why me and my colleague outlined things that could save money. I hope that answers the question.
Does that help you, Councillor Perkin?
Yeah,
you can carry on.
it does. No, it does. Thank
Sorry,
you.
can I just ask Martin to come in for a minute?
Yeah.
I think Councillor Jays is exactly right in terms of some of those projects or fees weren't in fees and charges because they're projects to be developed, and so that the business cases haven't been done on those. The only thing I would just want the committee to be aware of, the cost of the parking machines would have come out of a ring-fenced reserve, the Civil Enforcement Fund reserve, as opposed to revenue. So that's not a revenue saving, it's a one-off saving from a ring-fenced fund. And that fund is created by resident parking permit income, PC, penalty charge notice income, and is ring-fenced for that type of expenditure. So that's the only thing I would correct Councillor Jays on. The rest is all possible. When we're setting an income target for pay and display parking, there is always going to be an element of variability in it. Some years it's up, some years it's down, and so when we set that, there are some that we're not quite sure how much income that would generate, but we'll put a sum in the budget to be able to do that. So we're fairly comfortable that should amendments be made, that there is some wriggle room within that budget, if that helps.
Yeah, thank you. That is helpful. So I'm probably, from the feel of the room, I can imagine I'm not going to be popular for the things that I say next, but I'm going to go for it anyway. We also have volunteers and clubs that have to pay for WAC in Faversham. The swimming pool volunteers have to now pay to park in there and volunteer in the car and in the swimming pool. The Arden volunteers have to pay to go and use the Arden Theatre. People that want to use Faversham Library have to pay to park in Institute Road Car Park or in Central Car Park. People who want to go and sit on memorial benches in Faversham, if they want to go there, they're going to have to pay for parking. And all of those things are really hard and really emotive, and I completely understand the feel in the room for wanting to remove parts of this policy. My concern is that £24,000, which this amendment is very reliant on, comes from the backs of residents who are also in a cost of living crisis, paying for their residence permits across the borough, and this amendment is going to go squarely to reducing car parking to nothing in car parks in one area of the borough and not across the patch. And I think that we have spent over the last year, and members that have already spoken were on the working group, looking at the fairest and most equitable way of charging car parking across the borough as a whole. And I think I think the amendment is speculative. I think it should have potentially come as an amendment to the budget, so that there was ability to discuss that in terms of any other additional things that the council might want to save money on. We know that the council has cut money out of other services, and I think that £30,000 would have done pretty well for those particular services that are now reduced as well. So I'm afraid on the back of that, I do not think that the amendment today is fair across the piece. I don't think my residents in Faversham would find it fair for me to represent them and vote on it, and so I'm very likely to oppose it.
So, thank you, Chairman. And can I just add my thanks of Councillor Nundy to Marilyn and Simon for their input tonight. To all of those who've turned up tonight, to all of those that are looking online, and to all of those who signed the 3 petitions, which I was happy to and pleased to be asked to pass on to the Council on behalf of the nearly 900 people, I think we're at now, who signed those petitions. And they didn't sign them lightly, Chairman. They signed them through because of outrage. And it was let's be clear, we're discussing this tonight because the administration proposed imposing these charges at car parks in Queenborough and up at Minster by the Little Oyster. And members of the administration at the time, a couple of weeks ago at the budget meeting, voted to set a budget that relied on those charges being made and imposed. I implore the members here tonight to change their minds on this and support the amendment that's been proposed this evening to item 5 on the recommendations. We could have put the whole matter to bed at the full council meeting a couple of weeks ago if the administration had supported our amendments, which pretty much mirrors what is being put tonight. They didn't. Well, we did suggest that we didn't impose charges at the car parks. We did suggest that we impose a charge on the shingle bank, and both of those things sit within this amendment tonight. So there are similarities there. It is right, I think, that councillors sit and listen to what the public has to say. And tonight, I hope that we will come out of this meeting tonight and the public can go home knowing that we have learned and we have heard, we have listened, and we have acted on their behalf. I say let's put all the little petty politics to one side, Chairman, and let's do the right thing, and let's vote in favour of these amendments to item 5 tonight. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Whiting. I was actually at the budget meeting, and I think one of your proposals was to cut the nighttime charges to £1.50 when it was already on the agenda for the Communities Committee. Should this committee decide to charge up to 10 a.m. So it wasn't quite a clear-cut amendments at the budget as perhaps was made out.
But there were similarities on those 2 particular issues we're discussing tonight, and that's what I wanted to try to draw the committee's attention to, Chairman. Apologies if I went a little too far in.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'll echo what everybody said. Thank you to all of the members of the public that have come out and those that have joined online. It's unfortunate that this has come after the budget setting. But it is right that we listen to our residents. We are the councillors elected on behalf of them. We're not here for our own political gain. We're here for them. We're here to listen to their stories. We're here to fight for their corner. It is a shame that this policy has come out and it hasn't been done in the most correct way. Some of those posters that were posted out on lampposts didn't have full details on. Only half of them had email addresses, meaning that half of the residents probably haven't had a voice. So we've got an awful lot of responses, but there could have been more. There could have been more collaboration with the town council. And my proposal tonight is that we defer this issue so that we can take up that conversation with the town council with asset transfers. Queenborough back in the day owned most of what we have now. Most of Queenborough was then transferred into Swale Borough Council. Some of that land is still owned by the Town Council, in which some parking charges are to be set upon. We have a massive amount of heritage in Queenborough. Swale Borough Council gave the local pontoon, the All-Tide Landing, to the Trust, who have done an amazing job at restoring it and bringing in people, tourism to our town, not just to Queenborough, to the island and to Swale, all contributing to that economy. If we're then going to charge them for that facility, they're not coming. The Classic Boat Festival will dip. Our visitor numbers will dip. I've got residents living in Railway Terrace that will be paying over £500 a year to park near their homes. Queenborough is a small town. The houses are small. The parking spaces are ridiculous. We're then going to push people out into the community where they can't park as it is. We've got an awful lot of deprivation in our area. Over 100 food parcels are given out over the month to residents. That's thousands of meals we're giving to those who cannot afford to live. And now we're going to ask them to pay to live where they are? How ridiculous is that? For every penny that the government pulls from their pockets, we're pouring it into the riches. It's not right. Our residents deserve a voice. Our residents deserve to be heard. And I totally understand Councillor Perkins' point. Faversham residents are already paying for that. And it may be in the future that we have to relook at this. But if we have that conversation with the Town Council about possible asset transfers, this conversation may never have to happen again, because our residents own that community, our residents live there. It's not for this committee to decide what they have and what they don't have. It's for this committee to listen and put forward their recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shield. If I can move straight on to Councillor Worcester.
Thank you, Chair. So this isn't my usual committee, and I wanted to be here this evening because I wanted to make sure this decision was made with Island councillors, because we're the people that were voted in by Island residents. I will just add that when I've looked at the adjustment, the objections list that we were given, I know Swale has got its way of collecting objections, but I would say that easily we can see from the community we've had 2,000 more objections and discussion points around this item. And that's really good, because that is about debate, that is about not being on a fixed position and being able to consider everybody's viewpoint, which I think is the most important. We can't always come down and do the right thing for everybody. Not every decision is going to go everybody's way. That is absolutely impossible. However, for me, this comes down to a finance position. This is projected to earn the council £38,000 out of a £23 million budget that Swale looked at. It's a very, very small area that I think could be filled elsewhere. And I'm changing my position quite a lot of the time, but I would imagine that what I would like to see is more information around especially the Shingle Bank parking and for camper van parking, and for the reasons that actually that would answer Swale's budget position here potentially, because I've done a rudimentary check. I travel on that route for the school run twice a day, and I can tell you that Swale has missed out on about £5.5 grand over the last 3 weeks from camper van parking on the Shingle Bank alone. And actually, we are masking a homelessness issue there as well, because we need to be clear that these people are parking there. Sometimes they're there for holiday, absolutely, but sometimes they're there because they've got nowhere else to go. So I would absolutely support a deferment, but I would absolutely also potentially support the amendment this evening, but I would also like a feasibility study so that we can answer this question now for good about camper van parking, to make sure that it doesn't keep coming back, because this isn't the first time this has been raised. I've spoken to other members of the council over the last few weeks, and this has come back and back and back. And actually, I wonder if it's because it hasn't been investigated properly at source. So we need to do that so that even if the decision isn't what residents want, then we can actually say that we have considered their point of view fully, not as a second snatch of information from Facebook or whatever. They're entitled to the information, and I feel that we need to give it to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martington.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I don't go against any other speaker at the moment. Thank you, Ashley, for the very good turnout for Queenwood. That was very good. And I'm not going to go back over what all the petitions have been about, but just sit on the one main point that I put in as an issue was the fact that we're inwardly thinking the way we're going about things, especially with this issue, was to keep the little businesses alive. All the large businesses have got free parking to their customers, and you can go all the way down the line from Lidl's, the Saver Centre, Sittingbourne Retail Park, Morrison's, everywhere it's free. But the government, the council rather, and KCC get a very large income from the rates that those shops all pay for their car parks. So we have huge rate income from there anyway, and there's no need with that against the sort of money that they're paying that to start chasing around basically £30,000, you know. And I think it's inward thinking, and I've always advocated in the past that to get our town centres going, we've got to match the opposition. We've got to have ease of car parking. We need drop-off areas. We need covered areas where you can get the kids' coats on bits and pieces, and even a bit of cover over our shops. Sheerness should have 3 entrances and are known by them. You know, that's the way back to get people wanting to come into the town centres and even the little shopping areas that we're just talking here with these. So that there's a reason to go there because they want to be there. It's nice to be there, and then you match your opposition, and that's the only way you'll get those to grow. And I think that hitting the little shopping car parks now is going to likely to lose the very rates revenue you're all wanting to rely on as well. So there's going to be loss there as well as and I think on this sort of figure, as Dolly has just mentioned, can be found elsewhere, and that's what I stand by. Thank you.
Here, well said.
Thank you, Peter. And looks like the last speaker will be Councillor Ben Martin. Thank you.
Let's start with the defence of the officers, shall we? The officers don't set the policy. The administration sets the policy. The officers go out and they do the work to justify it. You have got them to set the policies and justify them, and now you're going to slate them. Please don't do that. Work with them. That's why we developed the officer member protocol. Don't throw the officers under the bus on it. We've heard the answer that all these car parks are going to be on Sheppey that we're going to charge for, and that we're not losing any free parking in Sittingbourne or Faversham. Let's take a look at that. 23% of the parking spaces on the island are free of use. 1% in Sittingbourne, 10% in Faversham. So there's already a disparity that benefits one area over the others. Now, I'm not saying we should change that, but it's worth remembering that. It's also worth remembering this isn't just about saving £38,000 this year. As members of this council have said repeatedly in every full council meeting I think that I've been in since 2019, back in the day you cut council tax and that had long-term impacts. That meant that when we had the cap on the rises, we've lost £1 million since as a result. This is 38k year in, year out that you're talking about getting rid of from the budget. Which officer do you want to get rid of? Do you want the fact that we've got unsustainable costs of temporary accommodation going up? Do we not recruit that extra officer that we need to solve that problem? Because that's what it is. It's really difficult decisions. Nobody likes paying for parking. Nobody likes making a decision where they're charging their residents to use parking. But parking spaces do cost money to maintain. Car parks cost money to maintain. As a council, we're in a very, very difficult position. Now, I wouldn't be defending the administration's budget. It's not mine to defend. but certainly we have to look at it in the round and with some fiscal logic. It's quite easy to be populist, but it's very difficult to make those tough decisions, which is part of the reasons why we're here and one of the reasons we're elected here. We also have to remember that, we did declare a climate emergency. Where's that gone tonight? Is that out the window? We want to encourage people back to their cars. It's really, really difficult. And I do have sympathy for residents that, I wouldn't want to pay for parking either. But I don't have a choice. I don't have a choice. And that's the difficulty. We have to make tough decisions.
Councillor Worcester's asked to come back, but if it is to come back on something, I want it to be very brief.
Yes, I agree.
And then Councillor Last will be the last.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to say that the prediction that if you did charge, that these car parks, particularly Little Oyster and the other one, they're very small. It's a prediction. It isn't an actual fact. And we can look at the charging car parks in Sheerness. Apart from market day, they're pretty well empty. And I think it'll be killing the goose, quite frankly. I will be supporting the amendment because I think it's, very important to keep the island economy is extremely poor. And I think we need to do things to actually do that. So that's the situation.
Sorry, Councillor Worcester, very briefly, please.
Very briefly. So, obviously, to answer Councillor Perkin and her party question, then why not put the feasibility study in the amendment? So, actually, it doesn't become a one-off payment. If we're looking at charging for camper vans on a shingle bank, that isn't a one-off. That's a revenue stream, and actually could be a growing revenue stream, which fits the bill all round, surely. But I'm not sure. I'm new to this, so I don't know how to correct the amendment or even add it to or even suggest that it's added to. Chair, apologies.
My view is it's too late to change the amendment, and that's something you might want to bring up at on a future occasion. To finish off with, Councillor Last.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to know, and I think you've just answered it, that both Councillor Sherrill and Councillor Worcester suggested that we defer this and get more information before making a decision. Is that feasible? In that Councillor Sherrill was talking about contacting parish councils, which we haven't done, and Councillor Worcester's talking about feasibility study with camper vans, both of which would have a big impact in a budget on what's going on, so that we could defer the final decision on this once we had more information to hand. That's partly what I was going to ask.
I don't think it should be deferred. I think we need to make the decision tonight. I think the people in I think the public would like to know and have the decision tonight rather than kick it into the long grass. If I just finish and come back on a few points, I believe that the town and parish councils were consulted on this, and I believe one has responded, but I'd have to double check that. Also, as a councillor with Swale Borough Council, I get notified of all consultations, and I tend to let my parish and parish councils know in the area, and I think there is a responsibility on all Swale councillors to ensure that the community in their area know of these. And if parish councils or town councils are saying we had no idea of this, then sometimes I think it's a bit remiss when parish or town councillors don't know that when their borough councillors visit them and try to keep them informed. I quite often, particularly it affects my parish, would put consultations out on the local Facebook groups, so as many people have the opportunity. But consultation is a good thing, because I think a few councillors said it tonight. Members of the public have come and spoken. They've made their views well known. This council does face financial pressures, as all do. There are inflationary pressures way above what a council can raise in council tax. We are limited to a mere 3% rise. Inflation is running at 5 or 6%, 10% last year, and sometimes even more. The government has cut funding to councils, and that is having a knock-on effect. We had £297,000 suddenly withdrawn from the recycling by KCC just before the budget. These all have an impact on the council, who we're in quite a good position at the moment. But as Councillor Martin said, we have to watch the pennies, and we have to protect going forward. And I do agree, should it just be free car parks, or should it be all the free ones being looked at? But that's for the future. The decision tonight will be based on the free car parks, as stated in the report and in the amendment. So, you know, I did have a long bit of waffle, but I think everyone's listened, everyone's covered points, and Councillor Shield has a point. If Queenborough Council wanted to take on a car park, they could approach Swale Council and make that request, and it could be looked at. I know of one area where that has been made, and the council are looking at it. I can't make any decision on that. I can't say what will happen if they say yes or no. But if you don't ask, you certainly won't get. And from my point of view, I'd like to thank the members of the public coming. I think you've behaved very well. There's been very good points made for and against from different parties, different people with different backgrounds. It's a hard time for councils, and I accept it's a hard time for a lot of people. A lot of people are suffering. A lot of people can't even afford to go out for a meal. They can't afford to go out and take their kids to the cinema or to do things with their kids. And I appreciate that is hard for young families. But there was something put on the table and a consultation. There was something there, but members of obviously will make their decision based on the evidence or the information they've heard, what they've read, and what's been presented to them. So I'll stop my waffling, and I'll ask Councillor Nunding if he would like to sum up. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just on a point of order, that an amendment would normally be summed up by the proposer of the original motion, not the proposer of the amendment. I mean, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm happy for Councillor. It's just a point of. So you could rule that Councillor Nundy speaks, and I'd support that. But I just, as a point of order, it's the wrong procedure. But
thank you for that.
You'd need to sanction it. That's all.
Thank you for that point of order. What I will do, I feel it's nice if Councillor Mundy can come back, if he so wishes, on this particular point and sum up very briefly. And do you want a recorded vote?
Could I ask for a recorded vote?
Who would like a recorded vote? Everyone's happy? Yep. Then we'll do a recorded vote. Thank you.
Good to go? Oh, thank you, Chair. I appreciate some of the points that have been made, particularly around Faversham, but at the moment, what we're actually discussing tonight are the 3 car parks on the Isle of Sheppey, because that's the one that's in the report. That's the ones that we actually need to focus on at the moment. I know that car parks in Faversham have seen an increase, you know, and I totally understand that, and I get it's difficult for Faversham residents. On the flip side of it, though, the increase to Sheppey residents with these parking charges being introduced is huge. It's not a small amount that's going to be that's being increased. It's a total new parking charge coming in for car parks that, quite frankly, don't warrant it. People It's speculative what I'm saying. I get that there is an element of speculation in it, but there's also an element of speculation in how much money is going to be made from the car parks. If you introduce car parking charges to a car park and people don't park in it, you will not make any money. People will go elsewhere. They will park on Seaside Avenue at the Little Oyster. I can speak about that because that's in my ward. Unfortunately, I don't have a great deal of knowledge around parts of the areas of Queenborough, so I won't comment on that. But I know for a fact Seaside Avenue will be absolutely jam-packed. The Road of the Lees, absolutely jam-packed. The unmade roads that come off of Seaside Avenue, Southsea Avenue, Scarborough Drive, Augustin, they will be jam-packed with cars. People won't park in that car park. They will park somewhere else and the council won't get any money, but they would have still lost £24,000 putting the parking meters in. To sum up very quickly, the Vox Populi are in the room tonight. They have spoken, and this is a time. There are times that we should use our expertise and our skills and our local knowledge to make decisions on behalf of people. I also think there are times that we should listen to what members of the public have to say and listen to it. Thank you.
Point of order, Chair. We've heard a request for deferment. It's been proposed and seconded. I believe we should debate that.
It wasn't formally proposed and seconded. But it's a bit late now because the debate's finished. And I think we should move to the vote.
We're happy just to move to the vote, Chair.
I'm pleased about that. Thank you very much. So we're going to do a recorded vote. Do you call out the names?
Do you want me to read the names out?
If you do, yeah.
Right, I'll read the names of each councillors out and you can say whether you're for, against or abstain. So Councillor Cheeseman?
For.
Councillor Jays?
For the amendment.
Councillor Last? For. Councillor MacDonald?
For the amendment.
Councillor Ben Martin?
Against.
Councillor Whiting?
For the amendment.
Councillor Marchington?
For.
Councillor No?
For.
Councillor Nundy?
For the amendment.
Councillor Palmer?
Against.
Councillor Perkin? Councillor Shield?
For.
Councillor Worcester?
For.
And Councillor Winklis? Thank you.
That's it. 11 for the amendment, 3 against. So the amendment is carried. So we will progress with items 1 to 4. Recommendations 1 to 4. And those recommendations are to note the response to the draft parking public consultation, to discuss and agree the parking policy member working group's recommendation changes to the draft policy, to endorse and recommend the draft parking policy and adopt the policy to be adopted by the Policy and Resources Committee. And 4, members are asked to agree that the time period for car parking tariffs to be charged will be 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. with no charge between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. You've covered all that. So,
Mr. Chairman, are we taking one at a time, are we?
I'm quite happy to take 1 to 3 and do 4 separate if you so wish. Is that what you're on about?
Yeah, you get them in front of me.
Okay, so I will propose 1 to 3. Do I have a seconder? Okay, thank you. So, all I say is, you've read this report. Do you want to come on to anything? It's all been done. We've gone through it, and I hope you can support these recommendations. So I propose we just move straight to the vote and vote on these three now. Sorry. The recommendations 1 to 3 as shown in the paper. Just by a show of hands. Those against? Any abstentions? Recommendation 4, that members are asked to agree that the time period for parking car tariffs be charged, let's put my glasses on, will be 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. with no charge between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. So I'll propose that.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Winkles. And if everyone quite happy, we'll move to the... Do you want to say something? Do you want to...
Thank you. I think if we must have evening charges, I think they should be at pre-COVID parking rates and be a round pound figure between the hours of 7 and 10. This should achieve the same results as the £3 for the whole 3 hours. I said in the parking policy working group, this is unfair to our leisure centre users in Faversham, the swimming pool users, and your theatre group. But I also think this should be except the multi-storey and the forum car parks. That's where the council makes its money in parking. That's where people go with a bit of disposable income. I know it's too late to propose it now, but I raised it in the parking working group, and I think it was worth raising here as well. And I also think there should be different out-of-town charging rates compared to the main 3 commercial towns, which was in the policy.
Yeah, I think what we're looking at is charges now, times, not charges, and the time to have probably brought that in would have been in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be voting against this particular one. As I said at the full council, I think that the evening charges are an unfair charge on our nighttime economies in our town centres. I think they're an unfair charge on the volunteers that turn up, for example, to the swimming club in Sheerness and have to now pay to go and help our young people learn to swim, a life-saving lesson for all of them. And I see the effect it's having on our nighttime economy in Sheerness and in other town centres. And I cannot agree. And I know we suggested at full council that we could amend at the budget meeting that we could amend this to reduce the charges by half. But I would like to see this particular recommendation 4, come back to this committee when we can have a much fuller report, perhaps, on the effect that this is having. Now that we know the effect that it's having on our nighttime economy and on our volunteer economy in our town centres. So I would, if you'd allow me to propose that as an amendment to take this back to a future committee, then I'd happily propose it. If not, I'd have to simply vote against it. Thank you, Chair.
I think to bring in an amendment like this, I think it should have been in writing so it could be properly looked at. However, I do feel that this is about the about the timings. Now, if this doesn't go through tonight, then my understanding was as the chargings would stand as they currently are, and was agreed at the budget. I don't know if you want to clarify that, but...
Yeah, I'm happy to say if we don't have a decision then the charges would stay 6 a.m. till midnight until a new decision was made. So, because that's the current tariff charging. Clearly tonight we don't have the financial information to provide, but what I would say, there's been a cross-party working group where all parties had representation and have seen that information over the last year. So we presented a whole range of financial information with different scenarios tested that got us to this position. What I would say as well is that this changed timing clearly reduces down the amount of time that we're charging for, but also solves a number of other problems. So we heard in the working party around the ability to stay in short stay car parks. If you go out for an evening and you have to go back to your car within 4 hours to move it up until midnight, that's obviously not suitable for residents. So this is responding to, if you're in a short stay car park, you don't have to return to your car after the 4 hours, because obviously the charges will come in. Let's say most people go out between 6 and 7, then you're not having to go back. So the working group spoke at length about different scenarios and different financial impacts on the budget. Certainly the discussion around what has been proposed, what hasn't been proposed, but the things that have been raised tonight, they are massive financial impacts for the council, and I have to make the committee aware of that. Evening charging brings in over £300,000 a year in pay and display income, and so that moves much more further away from the £30,000 decision that people were discussing earlier.
Sorry. So, Councillor Harrison, if you want to come in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I'd echo the words that there was a working group. There are a number of working groups going on across the council on a variety of topics, which gets into the nitty-gritty and detail and can take comments from all over the show. It is very important that members who are appointed actually attend. Secondly, a number of items have come up this evening, so I very much hope that your committee will not consider that the work of the parking working group has finished and it can be shut down, because from the comments that I've sat listening to tonight, there are a number of issues on parking that we do need to have the sort of detailed discussion on that it is very difficult to have in a very large committee. So I hope that you will continue with the parking working group and look at some of the issues that have been raised this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I just really, I think Councillor Harrison's preempted me. I just wanted to say that I think the working party's still got jobs to do. I think we've highlighted here tonight there are other aspects we need to be looking at. So hopefully I was going to say that this would carry on going as an ongoing working group.
Councillor Winkler.
Thank you, Chair. I slightly disagree with Councillor Whiting's comments. I think if anybody could afford to go and eat in restaurants at the foreign car park, and they can't afford a slight increase in car parking charges, I would be very surprised. We are getting less and less funding from central government for our services, and the car parking charges bring up an immense amount of finance into this administration or into this council. So there's a choice. Do we cut the public conveniences and such services, or do we go along with the charges? And I'm going along with the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So my individual opinion about this is that I will be going with and supporting the recommendation this evening. And my opinion is that the working group have done an awful lot of work. And actually, as far as I'm aware, and I'm hoping somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, that if it turns out that, for instance, this isn't a suitable way forward in terms of nobody using our car parks, then that can be brought back here at a later date and discussed and changed and worked through as part of ongoing work from the working party. Because I think if the working group has put effort into doing this and looked at all officers' concerns, and officers have put a lot of work into the working group, then I'm prepared to suck it and see. And I think that is what I'm going to go on, unless somebody can correct me and say, well, actually, this what's decided this evening. If it turns out to be absolutely horrendous, we can never change it again in the lifetime of Swale Borough Council, then maybe I could reconsider that position. But maybe I can have a answer to that. Thank you.
My view is any changes that members wish to put forward, they can. Nothing is written ever in tablets of stone. It's all down to the views and democracy of members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Nundy, followed by Councillor.
While I appreciate a lot of the points that are being raised by members tonight, I do think that charging in the evening time, the rates that are going to be it's not necessarily going to negatively impact people that are going out for a slap-up meal and going to the cinema or going bowling, because that is in itself quite an expensive thing to do. What I think it could affect are people that are going to some of the smaller, more independent businesses in the high street and in our town centres that don't charge a lot, and it could actually cut off communication, because let's face it, public transport in this area is an absolute nightmare. What public transport?
Councillor Martin.
So we already have evening parking charges, and I seem to remember when we made that original decision, we were told it was going to generate about £75,000 a year in income. And actually it's generated a lot more, because our officers are good and they give us reasonable estimates of what things are going to be. They don't pad it out. They don't go, actually, yeah, you'll get 300 grand out of this. No. They always give us a very reasonable estimate. I don't recall 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. being one of the times consulted on in the consultation. That's where my concern starts coming in. I seem to recall the suggestion of 8 till 8, 6 till 6 free slot overnight, but I don't remember this particular one being what was proposed. Realistically, if you want to reduce parking charges of an evening, you have to vote for this, because that's the only option on the table. Otherwise, you're keeping them where they are all night, which makes no sense to me. So I'm likely to support the recommendation that's there, but I am concerned that it's not one of the ones that was actually consulted on.
It's a really astute point there, Councillor Martin. What the legislation says is that you can consult on something and then respond to the feedback that you've got during that consultation. So what this is in essence doing is improving the position that we consulted on, which was a fixed cost of £3 over that evening period, and this is removing that cost between 10 and 7. So you can't go the other way, you can't make it higher, but you can make it lower.
Marchington.
Yeah, I was going to...
Oh, sorry, McDonald.
Can I go?
Yeah,
I was going to say this earlier, but I got skipped over. Just a question. Are we going to get to actually discuss the policy? Because it's like a number of people have just said the policy working group have put a ton of work into it, and we're actually not discussing anything beyond car parking charges. And that, I think, is a real shame in terms of displaying the work that we have done. Secondly, there's been a lot of comment about the working group having done a lot of work and, you know, look through all the evidence, and we want to keep the working group going. But as someone who's been on the working group, I've just sat here and really watched quite a number of recommendations the working group put together be undermined at the very, very last second. And I've just found, so far, I just wanted to voice that I've found the entire situation really frustrating. And that if that continues, so this is something that our group were really keen on pushing when we first elected. We said we would like to relook at parking, because we wanted to look at the impacts specifically on the volunteer sector in Faversham, on the overspill that is causing issues in Preston Street, on overspill that's going into our residential streets, to look at whether we're going to relook at some of the residence parking permit schemes that have been in place since 1994. And I've raised a lot of these at the working group, and, you know, there's been some promise to look into those issues, but we're here this evening voting on a number of things which haven't come through that group at all, and it's not, for me, it's not good process and it's not good governance, and I'm just really disappointed with the entire debate. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I would say that this policy number 4 seems to me quite sensible. Because for one thing, if you've stopped charging at 10 p.m, you don't need the enforcement people to be out late at night after 10 p.m. So it seems to me that the cost of that would actually help.
Okay, thank you. Well, with that, I don't think there's any other speakers, so I think we should move to the vote. I hear what you say, Councillor Perkin. But I did say before we did recommendation 1, 2 and 3, does anyone want to bring anything in? And I looked round and no one... Sorry, and then I didn't see. Sorry, I didn't see that. Thank you. So with that, we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of recommendation 4. Members are asked to agree that the time period for car parking tariffs be changed from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. with no charge between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. All those in favour? Yeah. All those against? Any abstentions? 3. So, recommendation 4 is carried. Thank you. That takes us to page 63, which is agenda item 6. There's 2 recommendations there. The committee is asked to note the contents of the report, and the committee is asked to provide a steer for minimising the impact and the next steps post the 31st of March 2024. If I could ask the officer to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Sarah Jane Radlin. I'm the Community and Partnerships Manager. Just to update, we had an update today from the Chancellor's budget, and we've been given an extra 6 months funding for Household Support Fund. So one of the recommendations I would propose that we defer up, but I will provide the update on the paper as well. So we're just about to come to the end of a year's worth of funding. We had about £505,000, which was split up into 4 quarters across the year. We have worked very closely with the voluntary and community sector in Swale to deliver household support fund to our most vulnerable residents. The model, which has evolved over time, initially when we first did the first round, which was a winter grant scheme, we delivered some in-house voucher schemes, and this was very resource intensive, and we didn't find that we were able to sort of reach enough families through that scheme. So as we've developed the scheme, we have worked really closely through feedback with residents to look at how we can ensure that we're getting the most value out of the money that we're provided from government. Some examples of the offer that we currently deliver through the scheme: Aid UK on the Sheppey, and Aid UK Faversham and Sittingbourne, now Kent Rivers, providing hot meals and food shopping services for residents over the age of 55. We're working with a variety of food banks across the borough who are providing emergency food parcels to families. We have continued with our contract with Children and Families to deliver the Fuel and Water Advisor Service, which is an energy advice service which allows people to have access to reducing energy in their homes, and also access to the Fuel Bank Foundation vouchers. Alongside a number of other smaller schemes which include hot meals for children from West Faversham Association and a small white goods service repair service through Swale Food Bank. These partnerships have been really successful. We have managed to create a really good network through our cost of living group, and we are capturing data and feedback as we go through each quarter of the scheme. There is some data listed within the paper on the numbers of households supported and what we have supported through that round, but we're looking at over 30,000 households for the year, so that's quite a lot of support that's been provided through that. We will hopefully continue in the same format, but we will need to receive the guidance from government as to what this extension, what we can continue to deliver through the extension. But considering the timescales, hopefully we should still be able to deliver in the same vein that we are at the moment. And I think we would like to come back probably before the end of this next extension to discuss the impact of no further funding, if that's a possibility at that point. Thank you, Chair.
I currently have 3 people who wish to ask questions or make comment. There's Councillor Nundy, followed by Councillor Whiting, followed by Councillor Jays. Make that 4 people, followed by Councillor Perkin. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to propose the recommendation. Okay, so we've got a proposer and a seconder. Over to Councillor Mundy.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that's been put into the report, and thank you to the officers that have actually implemented the housing support, where the money's gone for the housing support fund. It's clear from looking at the report how much of an impact this has had. 4,444 people getting helped out with household fuel bills. It's the basics that people don't have at the moment, and in a way I'm pleased that in the budget that's been extended for another 6 months. But actually that needs to be extended for a lot longer than that, because I don't think the cost of living crisis is going to go away in those 6 months. When's the next, quick question, when is the next community meeting after this one?
That's not set yet.
That's not set. The only reason I was asking was because obviously the 6 months that will creep up on us, So while I appreciate it may be beneficial to defer the item and actually come back to it at a later stage, I understand the reasons behind that. If that later stage is going to be too near the end of that 6 months, well, actually, we're running out of time by that point and we will just be scrambling around. I think sometimes it's better to get a rough idea of what you want to do and fine-tune it at a later stage, and then move forward like that.
Councillor Whiting.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll start. I mean, clear from the report that this money has made a huge difference and a massive positive impact on a lot of lives in Swale. And that is really down to the hard work of the officers and the partner agencies that have worked with the council to get this money out the door to where it really is much needed. In a way, I'd like to say thanks to Jeremy Hunt. It would have been nice if he'd have said all this a couple of weeks ago, but at least he said it today. And to extend, I've taken from what he read, picking up on what the officer said, I think, Chairman, I've taken from what he said that the scheme will be extended with no changes to it, so we can continue in the vein that we are, because we are asked also to provide a steer for minimising to how we move forward. I mean, my steer would simply be carry on what we're doing because we're doing a good job. He has said there will be money, so we need to wait and see exactly how much of that £500 million we get a share of, what our share is. But I don't think it's time, certainly not time to stop. Stop, as he said, I think there's not time to stop that targeted help that the fund offers. So I would urge that we carry on doing what we're doing in the way we're doing it, and we just must expect a note from government as soon as possible and make sure we chase them to find out exactly what Swale's share of that £500 million will be. But I think it all reads better following his announcement today. I just wish he'd have made the announcement a few weeks ago.
Thank you, Councillor Whiting.
Thank you, Councillor Whiting. I think we've got quite a robust plan in place, and so we can mobilise quite quickly with our VCS to continue the delivery as we are. So, yeah, that'll be good.
Councillor Jays.
Thank you, Chair. What a surprise. Money from government snatched away and given back on budget day. All we heard was recycled policies. I want to thank our officers for managing this with such a small team, and to all the voluntary and community organisations and partners involved. I take it we're going to defer recommendation 2 and just put recommendation 1. I also like to thank government for the 25 days notice for our officers. It's not like you had other things to do.
I think it's a good point, and if everyone's in agreement, we can defer recommendation 2 and just work on recommendation 1. Councillor Perkin.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to support other comments that have said how much the officers have done and how much this has clearly made a very positive impact to people who are the most vulnerable in the borough. So many thanks to the officers for that. The Household Support Fund is it's a really brilliant sticking plaster, but it is a sticking plaster to cover up cracks in a system that patently doesn't work for a lot of people. And to kind of threaten to pull the rug out from underneath people's feet and leave them hanging and then wait till budget day to say, oh no, we're going to put it on for another 6 months, is no way to treat people that need it. It's no way to treat the charities that rely on that funding to be able to provide those services. And it's no way to treat local authorities that end up being the people that have to administer these support schemes. I can't thank Jeremy Hunt for extending it, because at the end of the day, they're literally in charge of the budget, and they could have made decisions that would have made the Household Support Fund completely irrelevant, and they haven't. And so at this stage in the game, it's just another depressing, electioneering sticking plaster that I'm glad exists, but wish didn't.
thank you for some very good points well made. Councillor Martin.
It's a bit nicer when money's given back to you at the last minute rather than pulled from under you at the last minute on budget night, isn't it? Nothing about our budget night there at all. But thinking back on this one, I don't think we should defer number 2 on this, because actually we do need a plan. Because what happens if it's not going to be given another 6 months and people are still in dire straits? I appreciate the work that's been put in by officers. I think we could leverage some of the partners that we work with in social housing. They have social funds as well, and I'm sure that they would be more than happy to work in partnership with us to try and deliver it. They certainly do in Maidstone. So let's nick some ideas out of our colleagues over there and bully them into giving us some of their contacts too. But we have got to work together to make sure that, you know, whatever government ends up in Westminster at the end of the year, who knows, in a few months' time we might not be able to make decisions for a little while. So we've got to be ready for what comes next and how bad it could be. Plan for the worst and hope for the best.
I think it's a good point, but I think the devil's in the detail. You don't know what strings are attached with this money, but the team already have a plan on the table working with the community, the voluntary sector and other partners, and I think it gives us time to feed in and for more information to come out, and maybe on the forward plan it could be added to the community committees early, so hopefully if the money isn't extended, I mean I look at what 6 months is September, October, if it isn't extended further, then we've got time to plan. So I think I'm comfortable deferring that. So when we do look at it, we've got full information. And I appreciate, yes, it is last minute, but I think it will be well appreciated, and I think the team will use it well. I don't know if Sarah wants to come back on anything on that.
We have already started conversations about how we can broaden the service offer so that when residents are accessing support, they're also are being signposted on, and we're kind of having a more holistic approach to the support. So they're trying to understand what the other issues are and why they're in that sort of situation. It's difficult because obviously we don't want to put more pressure on an already strained voluntary sector, but we also know that we need to delve into those issues and find out what else is, why they're in that situation. So yeah, the conversation, and we do work closely with Southern Housing as well, so that they're on our cost of living group. So yeah.
Councillor Worcester.
Thanks, Chair. I go along to the absolutely fantastic cost of living group that is supported by yourself and by officers, and I cannot speak highly enough. And this is one of the areas that SWAL does excellently. It is not a box ticking exercise. This is one of the areas where SWAL has put up an agenda and it has met that in spades. Well done. It's not about the money. We're never going to have enough money to put into this sector, to this area. It's about the organisation, and it's about the commitment that SWAL has shown to these people, these organisations, and actually making sure that our residents are absolutely, to the best of our ability, supported in this area. So nothing but praise from this direction. And to support that, I would absolutely love to see, when you do come to talk about a steer for how we can mitigate or limit the impact of this, I would love to have data sharing agreements in place. I would love to have policy in place so that we are ready for that open and transparent conversation that could exist with towns and parishes, so that actually that conversation can take place transparently about what of these services that SWAL could potentially stop offering, that potentially they could pick up if they see that as a real priority for their residents. I'm not saying it's going to be everything, but I think that could be part of an underpinning idea that would mean that instead of an area losing 100% of that support because the money is not there, that actually some level of support could still be given via towns and parishes, if that makes sense. But that was looking at recommendation 2, and of course you're deferring that, but nothing but praise from this direction. Well done. Thank you.
I'll take Councillor MacDonald as he hasn't spoken yet, and then I think Councillor Whiting has one small question at the end.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I obviously don't know how the whole scheme works, but clearly we may be able to save a little bit on the fuel things during the summer months. I don't, you know, as I say, I haven't got a clue how you do it, and I think it's absolutely fantastic, the whole scheme. So, you know, maybe we can do a little bit of saving there too. You obviously probably can't roll the money over. That's not allowed by the Sahubris in Whitehall, but anyway, well done.
Thank you for that. I think you'll find that they need more money, and I think yes, they do an excellent job, and they work with an excellent team who give advice, try and support each other, and feed information in. Councillor White.
I'm obliged, Chairman. It's only a very quick question. It's about the funding. I wondered whether, because I couldn't see it in the report, whether Swale actually gets an element of this funding is for the admin of the scheme, and that government pay us to do that. And if they do, I don't know if they do or not, but if they do, are we able to via some of that money across to the voluntary sector to assist them in the work in funding the work they're doing on our behalf?
Sorry.
Yeah, we can take out administration costs from the fund, which are very minimal officer hours, and the majority of the fund goes to the sector. So we're only taking very minimal officer hours from the fund. The rest is actually going out on delivery.
Which I'm very thank you for that. I'm very pleased, and that's how it should be. I just wondered whether there was any possibility we could use the small amount that we do take to assist the voluntary sector in delivering in their overhead in delivering what we're asking them to deliver.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. Yeah, no, I just to clarify, and it's officer time, so yeah, the rest is going out to the sector.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for presenting the report. Thank you very much for the debate. I think we should now move to the vote on the recommendation 1. The committee are asked to note the contents of the report. Everyone happy with that? Noted. We now move on to agenda item 7 at page 77, the Built Facilities Strategy, and I will ask the lead officer to introduce the report. But, yeah, go on.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, members. First report this evening is the Built Facilities Strategy. You'll be familiar with this one, as I think this is the third time we've brought this to this committee. Hopefully this will be the final time, so we can the recommendations are that the committee adopt the strategy that's been developed for the period 2024 through to 2038, and that's attached to Appendix 1, and that delegated authority is given to the Head of Environment and Leisure in consultation with the Chair of the Community Committee to make any minor amendments should Sport England recommend any final changes prior to the document being approved. The current BFS, you'll recall, expired at the back end of last year, and we are developing the current strategy in line with the local plan. The strategy follows Sport England guidance and is supported by the governing bodies and helps to provide evidence base for that local plan. It is clear from the strategy that there will be some needs for capital investment in the leisure facilities, and that's detailed at 2.7. The main key needs that have been identified, the 3 main key needs through the strategy are listed at 2.8, which is to extend the water provision at the Sheppey Pool from 6 to 8 lanes, to retain the existing levels of community accessibility in sports halls, swimming pools and the fitness stations, and to consider how best to enhance and dedicate a gymnastics facility and explore feasibility of increasing the indoor bowls provision. Alternative options, failure to adopt the strategy will severely impact the Council's ability to gain any developer contributions and any national funding to support the development and delivery of any new built facilities, and as such is therefore not recommended. So I'll pause there if there are any questions.
So first of all, I'll propose the recommendations as stated in the report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Jays. Councillor Nundy.
Thank you. In the report itself, but the recommendation bit, under equality and diversity, there's nothing identified. So that's quite. Leisure is a big part of people's lives. Specifically, what's really important, I think, is getting disabled people to exercise. So I'm concerned that nothing has been put there. I know it's covered under health and wellbeing, but surely as part of that, some of the implication should be that services are being improved to make the facilities more accessible, particularly if we're going to look at actually widening Sheppey Pool from 6 to 8 lanes. That's going to increase the size of the pool, which would actually potentially, based on the layout, actually make it harder for disabled people to actually get into the pool because of where the hoist is located.
Any new enhancement developments will consider DDA requirements as part of that provision, a part of the project or the refurbishment. So therefore that will be covered as part of that project. I take your point, we could have referred that to in the report, and I'll take that on board.
Yes, with regard to the pool, I think frankly it's past its sell-by date. And I think we ought to be working, I know some of the officers are working on it, but we should be looking at the provision of a new facility and getting the necessary grants for actually doing that, particularly in an area where there's extremely poor economic base. So that's the Sheppey one. The other thing I did catch slightly on the report about the developer contributions, and I think we should make absolutely certain that our planners or whoever decides those things gets a contribution from developers, because some of them have been making huge sums of money, and I don't think it'd hurt to make a contribution towards the facilities which hopefully the new residents will actually use.
Some very good points made, Councillor MacDonald. Anything you want to come back on? Or?
Agreed, valid points. I think we are working very closely with Sport England, following their guidance and criteria to facilitate the outputs of the strategy, and that's work that's has already begun. Yeah, there are some avenues that we still need to explore on that one.
Sorry, just to add, Chair, through you. The whole point of the strategy is to provide the evidence base for the local plan, which allows us to ask for the developer contributions. Our existing local plan doesn't allow us to ask for contributions to built leisure, only to playing pitches and playgrounds and other stuff. So that's really the key part of this strategy.
Councillor Martin.
I was here last time we discussed it as a sub as well, shockingly. A very good report as ever, and just as that reminder, when we're looking at capital investment in swimming pools, during COVID, all pools were told that they needed to increase the amount of chlorine in the mix. That has led to increased rates of corrosion, which is one of the reasons why there's so many surveys going on in pools and whatnot, and scaffolding up in Faversham pools, for example. It's reduced the length of time that those pool facilities are going to last for. So certainly another knock on the door of lobbying is probably needed.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it looks like there's nobody else who wants... Sorry, Councillor Perkins.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight page 129. When it speaks about diversity, it says that the Borough Council will support efforts to tackle discrimination across the sector and holding organisations to account for failings in this area. And we know that there's been some really high-profile campaigns, especially in football, around the reductions and eradication of racism. There's been lots of campaigns around making gyms safe for women to take part in, and it's just really good to see such a strong emphasis being put on that to make sport accessible to everybody.
No, thank you for that. And again, I think a well-presented report. It has been through this committee several times. I don't see anybody else wanting to speak, so we can move straight to the vote if that's all right. So the recommendations are both 1 and 2. Can we take them together? And who's in favour of the recommendations 1 and 2 as stated in the report? Unless you haven't said that. Yeah. That brings us on to agenda item 8, which is at page 247 of your agenda pack, and this is the playing pitch strategy. If I could ask the lead officer to present this report as well, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, you'll recall that the playing pitch strategy runs sort of hand in hand with the built facility strategy and previous versions, and the key sporting activity recommendations have come through to this committee and been approved previously. There are 2 recommendations this evening, very similar theme to the previous report, that the committee adopt the playing pitch strategy that's attached at Appendix 1, and that the delegated authority be given to the Head of Environment and Leisure, and in consultation with the Chair, should Sport England make any changes. As with the built facility strategy, this new strategy will run for the period 2024 to 2038 in line with the local plan, and this focuses on the borough sports pitches, analyses those pitches, and provides a strategy suggested strategy going forward, and a recommendation for the main sporting activities within the borough. Again, the strategy follows Sport England guidance, and we've had a number of meetings with the national governing bodies for each of the key sports, and that provides us with the robust evidence that we need for the local plan process. It is important that Sport England sign off the document. We have had some initial feedback from them around formatting as much as anything, and a number of queries initially around the football allocation, which we've now started to work through to address, but they are minor tweaks on the size of a pitch, the number of pitches, that sort of thing. The alternative is there is an alternative not to adopt it, but obviously that's not a recommended option because of the requirements of Sport England and the ability for us to work alongside with our local plan. So I'll pause there for any questions.
I've had 2 members indicated so far. First one's Councillor Whiting, followed by Councillor Nundy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll be supporting the recommendations 1 and 2 as they're set.
Sorry, just to interrupt, and I was waiting for you to remind me, but I'd better do the proposal first, hadn't I?
I'll second it.
Okay, well, the proposals are 1 and 2. I've proposed and you've seconded.
Thank you. Yeah. Apologies for not reminding you, Chairman. I was saying in support of this. On 2.7, the officers, Jay's sort of half answered the question I had, which is about Sport England feedback, because it is important. It says on 2.7 on page 248 that we need that. I was interested to hear what he said about pitches. It's a minor amendment. Are they saying we need 1 more, 2 more, 10 more, 20 more?
No, it was to do with the statistical numbers that were in the report. The FA and Kent FA had slightly different numbers, so we've managed to have a 3-way meeting with those and address and agree those. So it was statistical variance rather than a pitch variance.
That's good. Thank you for that. That's great, and it also, I think, answers the question that Peter MacDonald raised on the last item, in respect of developer contributions. This is quite an important document to ensure that we can get those development contributions out of those that wish to develop more housing in the area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whiting. Over to Councillor Nunding.
Thank you, Chair. It's just another minor point from the report where something has been written that none identified, and that's safeguarding of children, young people and vulnerable adults. Because thinking about some of the stuff that we've learnt about safeguarding, well, since I've been on the council and other bits that I know about safeguarding, particularly of vulnerable adults, is the risk posed by people in positions of trust. So a football coach, a netball coach, a bowls coach, I don't know how many people play bowls, but I imagine it's quite a lot. They are all people in positions of trust, and parents will leave their children in their care for reasonably extended periods of time where they will be using changing facilities, and it surprises me that nothing has been identified in safeguarding children, young people and vulnerable adults in the report when we're talking about facilities where there are changing rooms where people are obviously going to be getting dressed, undressed, having a shower after a match or whatever. So I'm just curious as to what safeguards will be put in place in the strategy to ensure their safety.
Thank you. There, again, a valid point. I think the strategy focuses on the provision of delivery of sports pitches. What will happen underneath that within hire agreements, sports pitch management agreements, would be the safeguarding element that the specific club and their activities would be governed by that agreement, not necessarily the overarching strategy. But again, as with the previous one, I'll take that on board and we can reflect on that.
Thank you. As I say, I wasn't sure if it was worth raising. I'm still learning some of this stuff. I just wanted to ask a question, but thank you.
No, I think it's always worth raising, particularly relating to safeguarding.
And just to add, the process that we go for both of these strategies is lots of steering groups with the national governing bodies of sport, and they're obviously the ones that set the protocols for coaches. They have all of those sort of stock procedures in place, so they're the ones that govern that. If there was a safeguarding incident, it would go through the national governing bodies, and they're obviously involved in the development. And what's really key with both of these documents, and Councillor Harrison's, I think, going to welcome me saying this online, is that they're not going to go on the shelf, these strategies. They need that regular review. And so there are now working groups with those national governing bodies of sport to be able to regularly update them over the course of that time, because that's a long time period. Obviously facilities will change because developments will come on board, and so they need that regular update to go through. So those positions exist with the national governing body of sport.
Right, I've got 4 speakers to follow that. That's Councillor Worcester, Councillor Last, Councillor Perkin and Councillor Martin. So we go to Councillor Worcester first. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I've just got a couple of scrutiny questions, if that's okay. I just want to understand a few bits about the report. First of all, we're in Sittingbourne. It's not my area, but it's quite prevalent that obviously you've got a potential move from Sittingbourne Rugby Club coming into the development of Wise Lane, I think it is. Has that been reflected in the report? Brilliant. Sorry, I just probably didn't see it.
Yes, it is referred to, yes.
Lovely. And then obviously the next question refers around how you've termed Oasis School in Sheppey. Obviously they are no longer going to be holding that position, so it means that those 2 sites will be obviously split into 2 sites, so you might want to let the report reflect that. Also, it raises a larger question of how much this report relies on organisations that could possibly take that provision away. And so, for instance, the difference between obviously Kent maintained schools and academy schools, there are clear differences in the way that their assets are controlled. And have we got any sort of safeguards around the long-term use of these facilities, pitches, or you could quite happily tell me that actually this report's got nothing to do with it, it's like a snapshot picture as it is at the moment, and that would be down to the schools themselves to look at that, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Do you want to come back that one?
I think it's a really valid point, Councillor Worcester, in terms of the name change. Obviously, a document is only as good as the day that it's written, and things will change. So I'm happy to, if there is a generic name for that site that we can use, I'm happy to suggest that we change the name in the document on that. On the second item, in terms of the organisations, you're absolutely right. The whole point of the document, and a key point of the document, says that it's not just reliant upon the council. We can't provide every piece of provision. We are absolutely reliant upon other organisations, whether that be in the public or private sector. What one of the recommendations in the strategy is that when people touch the council in terms of their process, i.e. through the planning process, that we ask for community use agreements to be in place that give us greater teeth to be able to hold that organisation to account. It's not always possible, but certainly one of the key things in the strategy is saying, let our local plan require that be the case, so that we have a greater strength position at that point.
Just to come back on that quickly, Chair, both academies have now been announced for Sheppey, so I think that's kind of common knowledge, which you could change those sites to. It's not Minster or Sheerness, they've both got academies attached to those now. And thank you for telling me. I will go back and look up that community use agreement, because I think that's a really interesting piece of knowledge that I'm missing. So thanks very much, that's great.
Thank you, Councillor Worcester. Over to Councillor Last.
Yeah, just very quickly. I found it interesting reading through the report, but can you quantify or tell me why so many of our pitches are poor in standard? Is that lack of maintenance, or is it just quality of the pitch?
The criteria that's used as part of the strategy is set by Sport England, and therefore when discussions are taking place between the consultants and the governing bodies or the clubs, then there's an agreement on the standard of X pitch against the criteria. There has been a number of challenges, both location-wise, weather-wise, the type of soil we're on, so it does vary across the borough. From a cost investment perspective, which is part of the question, then we do have a regular grounds maintenance contract, which you'll be aware of, and that part of that contract is our sports pitch management, and therefore we work closely with our contractors to maintain each of the pitches to the best value we can, given the contract value. So they are inadvertently linked.
Can I just come back? It's concerning that there's such a high majority are poor. It's like it's not probably been maintained. The facilities within Swale have been not maintained for whatever reason, whether historic or whatever. But if I was looking from outside, I'd be concerned as a consultant that there's so many poor pitches. What's not gone on in Swale is what would go through my head. That's all I would say to that.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to talk about netball. So, Sittingbourne, up until just before COVID, had an affiliated league. There's about 13 to 15 teams that would play through the summer and the winter. That was closed down because the basically it wasn't making the money to be able to sustain itself. But I'm just wondering whether there's been conversations with England Netball about the amount of women that are affiliated with England Netball but are playing outside of the borough, because I would reckon it's quite a number. I'm one of those people. I know quite a number of people. I travel to Maidstone and to Medway to play netball. Also, the standard of tarmac pitches is really important for affiliation and for insurance. England Netball won't affiliate a league where the standard of the court is not up to where they would want it. falling over on grass is quite a lot different to falling over on tarmac in the rain. So I wonder whether there's and I'm fully happy with the recommendations in the report. I think it's a really solid report. I just wondered whether there's a little bit of extra work to look at the kind of displacement of netball to the affiliated leagues outside of the borough. Obviously, you've got Comets that are referenced in the report, and Comets are brilliant, and my team quite often get thumped by Comets, and they go on to kind of supply people in Super League and in the Roses. So yes, it's great to have the Comets as an affiliated league here and an affiliated coaching programme. But I worry about the amount of people that are getting costed out of playing when they'd like to, because the nearest place to be able to play is Maidstone. Thanks.
There are a number of recommendations within the strategy that we will need to pick up retrospectively with the governing bodies going forward. We have had, as I mentioned, we've had an initial meeting with each of their representatives and the consultants to go through that they are happy as the governing body with the strategy, and then each of those governing bodies will then have their own sort of development process that we would look at. From memory, I think it's 6 locations in the borough that netball and again tarmac predominantly, and we will work through those queries as we go, and try and develop as much of those areas as we can and identify any opportunities there may be within the borough to enhance any of the sporting activities.
And I think it's a really valid point, Councillor Perking, around being able to work. You know, a lot of people were reliant upon a small committee to be able to operate that league, to play locally. And one of the things that particularly we work closely with KCC and their active Kent and Medway partnership is around they have coach development, they have volunteer development officers that can hopefully try and harness some of that capacity if we have got large numbers. And I don't know, that's definitely a question we can ask that are migrating out of the borough to play. Then if we can harness some of that, then it's more likely that we'll be able to bring a location back into the borough. Part of that clearly is facilities, and that's why it's mentioned in here. But part of it is about capacity in the voluntary sector as well to be able to lead that. So yeah, it's important, and that's the point of this strategy, is around, this is about what is the current demand and supply. But there are other items, and particularly around that volunteer development.
Over to Councillor Martin. Thank you.
Again, this was here last time I subbed, and I can see that some of the recommendations that were there have gone in. So thank you very much. There, I can see some of those changes around looking at the areas nearby that are taking some of that demand have made it in. So thanks very much for that. I was looking through that list of cricket clubs and going, Christ, how many folded in the last 10 years? And you've just mentioned the key point. It's about volunteer capacity. What we've seen over the last 15 years, certainly, is a move to where Saturdays become a standard working day. So people don't have the time to give, particularly sports that require that bit higher level of maintenance. So people always used to chuckle when I said, you know, cricket only played 4 months a year. Can't be that much work. There's an awful lot more work for looking after a square than there is cutting a football pitch. That's for certain. You've got to make sure you've got the right sort of sand going on at the right time of year to keep it dry and whatnot. It's a really good set of policies. What I was going to address around safeguarding as well, I think it's key that you don't get too prescriptive in the strategy, because the sports governing bodies change what the guidance is on a whim. I remember looking at developing a new set of changing facilities for a cricket club 10 years ago, and it was, okay, you have 2 separate changing rooms, that's enough, separate shower. Then it was, no, you've got to have a 3rd changing room for the umpire. Then it was, no, actually you've got to have 2 away changing rooms and 2 home changing rooms in case there's an under 18 in the team of men. And all of a sudden your costs are doubling, and that was changing over the course of about a year. So it's good not to be overly prescriptive on a strategy that's going to be there for years to come.
Come back on it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that latter comment, and we follow Sport England design guidance that changes. So again, the planners through that process will be asking for the up-to-date information whenever a development comes forward.
I've got Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quickly, the Stamford Hill, which is obviously Eastchurch Prison, or one of the prisons, identifies a swimming pool. This was actually, I think the construction date is wrong. It was much earlier than that. It was erected by the RAF before the war. We've used it with the cadets, absolutely excellent. Unfortunately, apparently it's developed a crack, and the powers that be, not the prison service, the other Whitehall Brigade, have decided they're not going to reopen it.
Oh, do you want to come back on anything like that now?
Just to say, Councillor MacDonald, whilst it's listed on there, clearly it's not publicly accessible, and so therefore it hasn't been considered in the water space, to my knowledge.
Okay, and I think Councillor Whiting, you want to come back on something?
Just a very quick one. It was just the point that was made about the relevance and how things change over time. The report does mention that and suggests that changes to the policy and can be made, not on the hoof, but you get the gist, as and when the circumstances change. And whether that comes back to this committee to do that, I don't know, or whether we just delegate that to officers to update as required. But that's a decision I think perhaps you should take away, Chairman. I don't know, leave it with you. But
My thoughts on that would depend what the change was, personally. Oh, Councillor Nundy.
In flicking through the report, I clearly missed one of the sites that was listed and would like to declare a non-pecuniary interest in it. However, the monitoring officer has agreed to not disclose that interest, but I'm fairly certain that you know what I'm talking about, Chair.
Thank you for making that point. And
I genuinely didn't see it when I flicked. It's a very, very long document, and you do miss things sometimes.
And if you realise something, you've done the right thing in bringing it to the attention. Thank you. That means we can move to the vote. So, what I'd like to ask is, who's in favour of the recommendations 1 and 2 as shown in the report at Agenda 8? No. Anyone against? Any abstainments? And I take it that's because of the interest. Thank you. So that moves us on to the next item, which is the forward plan. I mean, I think it might be worth making a note, or the officers make a note about the Household Support Fund, and that can be put there. So now, if everyone's all right and have noted that, we can move on to item number 10.
Sorry, I had to get my hand up. On the forward, a couple of the issues we've had tonight, there have been 2 reports that in an ideal world would have come to this committee for policy decision before it went to P&R, before it went to budget, etc. For various reasons that didn't happen this year. It would be very helpful, and I think it's the same for all committees, that a real deep dive is done into what is going to be required for next year's budget, so that those reports can come to the relevant committee, including this one, in advance, so that we get things around the right way next year. That was all. Thank you.
I don't disagree, but if Emma wants to come back.
Thank you, Chair. And I think listening to today and the budget discussion, I think we do need to have a look at lessons learned, how things have gone. And I think parking is always a difficult issue. It will always be a difficult issue, and I think there's some learning for us as officers and members around that sequencing. I'm not sure, and I'm sure there may well be other examples, but I think that's probably it's an isolated incident. However, what I'm keen to do is look at where, because we're in service planning session at the moment around what will be the work that's going to happen in the next couple of years, trying to prioritise that. And I think that more forward look, where we're getting things on the forward plan a lot earlier, is something that we need to improve on. And so I'm hopeful that, one, we know when the dates of the reduced meetings are, that we can make sure that they're populated in advance, and that we're much more fleet of foot around all of that, so that we've got that forward look much better. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you for that answer. I would point out, perhaps when we come to the later item, we also refer to having to go back to P&R for the funding for something. So it's not the parking isn't isolated, so it was a wider point I was making. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I think we're always going to have, because of the committee system, where finances are involved, we won't have that luxury. We will always going to need to go back to and refer back to P&R for the budget elements, so that I can't avoid. What we can do better is just have a little bit more of an idea of that journey, but we won't have the choice of being able to make budget decisions at committees, service committees. It's always going to have to be referred back. But I think it's worthwhile having the service committees discuss the policies rather than them all go to P&R, which would have been the alternative, which I think this gives an opportunity for a good debate. Thank you.
We're moving on now to item 10, which was an extra sheet sort of added, and I think we've got to be careful because it is linked to a blue paper item. So if I can just let the officer introduce that, and I think that's Martin Cassell to do this one.
Good evening again. Started it, and I'll hopefully finish the committee with this report. So, as the committee's heard previously, a leisure working group has been set up with members from all parties on the council, and that working group has considered a range of information. What that's led to it doing is setting a vision and a set of objectives that this committee has signed off previously. And during the process, however, when we were looking at that information, it was clear that the council was not ready to decide on the next long-term plan. And that was for a number of reasons. Understanding the impact from the COVID recovery, understanding more about facility investment and improvements that are needed. And so therefore the existing contract allows for up to a further 2 years for an extension of the existing contract. And the open report tonight gives a number of recommendations around that. As Councillor Palmer has just mentioned, I'd remind members of the committee that there is an exempt appendix to this, and that's there because of commercially sensitive information which both affects the operators and the council's position. And so therefore, whilst I'm happy to answer questions in open setting around anything in the open report, let's just try to not steer into anything on that exempt paper. We do have a member of the public still here and possibly online, and so if at any point members wish to discuss the detail in the paper, then we would need to take that short break to go into exempt session.
Right, sorry. So with that, on the leisure centre contract extensions, 4 recommendations, number 1 to 4. So I'd like to propose those recommendations, and do I have a seconder? That's Councillor Jay seconding. Would anyone like to? Anyone got any questions on this paper here? With that in mind, then we'll move to the vote All in favour of the 4 recommendations as stated in the report? All in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? 4. So what's, I didn't count it. 11 and 4. Okay. Okay. Do we need to move on to the... Does anyone want to discuss the items at Agenda 12, which are... No. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. So, with that in mind, thank you all. It's not been as long as I thought it could have been. We won't be parking things till next year. We'll try and get things a bit more organised. Thank you. And thank you for your time, and have a nice, enjoyable rest of the evening.